Okay, so here we are in my first tutorial on how to create a sentence generator program in PHP. I'll be creating more of these sentence generators in different languages in future tutorials. For now, we're going to look at PHP, or object-oriented PHP. So, I'm going to create a new file in my web hosting. I'm going to call it mollybot.php, or you could call it whatever, so I'm going to call it whateverbot.php. So here we go, here's whateverbot. Now, the first thing we do, you want to create a program that can, first thing you do is you look into how it works with the object-oriented aspect of this. So let's say an object and a class, they're not quite the same thing. An object is an instance of a class. A blueprint, and you'll hear this term a lot, a blueprint for objects setting. There's objects around you all the time. They have properties and they do things. So when they do things, it's called a function in PHP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class called thing. I'm making subclasses of things, so there'll be lots of different types of things. Now, I'll give it properties. And what you do is you write public, and then the property with this $sign before it, in case you haven't encountered this notation. Basically, you put a $sign in front of a variable. You don't have to declare the variable, although it's advisable. Now you can keep adding these. Public width, public height, you gotta make sure you have the $sign. And I think I'm just gonna go ahead and pause this until I have more of these public properties. Okay, now this variable is going to be a boolean. Audibility equals, and I'm initializing it to true. Public visibility, I'm going to use these later, equals true. Public position local x equals 0.0. Now, what's interesting here, this is a floating point number. It's a number. It's a float type, but it's not a integer. It's not an integer. Integers have no decimal points. So this, and again, this automatically tells the variable that the thing in front of it is a floating point. Okay, moving on. Position local at y is, I'll initialize that to 0. This is public position local z. I'll initialize this to 0. Then, well, here's something interesting we're going to use later. Public bad or good. Well, I'm going to put the parenthesis in there. So we'll go back to my code. Now, Okay, so we have this function right here. Actually, I think we need another of these brackets here. Now we can add the return statement. After the new item is passed into the array, we can say return or give us the my iteration array, which will now contain the new value. So after we do this, we can do special functions. There's special functions in PHP called get and set, and one is for getting variables within the scope of the class, and getting variables within the class, and the other is for setting them or changing them. The reason for this is that it's considered bad practice to not do it directly, basically. So you have to use these get and set methods. Here's what they look like. I'll just show you. Get looks like this, set looks like this. So if you want to write them out, you have public function get, and then it takes an attribute. Again, parameters indicate that the function needs an input. Now I'm going to enter some code into here. Return this attribute. Notice that attribute doesn't have a $ here before it, and this does. This this is because that this variable refers to the pre-existing variable attribute, and attribute here without the $ refers to the new value we want to assign to the attribute. If they were expressed differently, like such as if we expressed these differently, then the program would not be able to determine which one was which. So it's a little confusing at the beginning, but the annotation will become more familiar to you as time goes on. Now I have public function set, and this takes two parameters, attribute and value. Now we can set limitations on which values can be valid, not by telling, hey, we can't use this value, but rather by changing it and conforming it inside of our set method. In this way, a lot of times coders are able to generate, because you can change and modify things that are in the class a certain way. You can limit integer values, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say if value is smaller than 0, we want this to be in a range of 0 to 100, so of course naturally if somebody tries to enter -1, then we proceed to say that the value is equal to 0. So then after that, if value is greater than 100, because we want to range from 0 to 100, you can say value equals 100. Then we can do what we usually do in a set method, which would be to retrieve the value that we have in the second parameter. So this attribute equals value. Now, after we do this, we can create another function. By the way, the purpose of this tutorial is ultimately going to be to create a program that can talk, not talk in voice, but can talk in words. So we'll see how that'll work later. And this takes a parameter called inside object and the existing attribute. Now, after we do this, we can create another function. By the way, the purpose of this tutorial is ultimately going to be to create a program that can talk, not talk in voice, but can talk in words. So we'll see how that'll work later.